So as you can hear, I've got a little bit of a cold. So if I seem a little like, loopy, that's because of my cold. But we're having a little last, I don't know, it's like a last hurrah of winter here or something like that. Got a little cold and rainy, chilly and rainy. What's it really cold? In the 40s. Rainy. So yeah, maybe somebody else would like to do a nigun to get us started. Anybody feeling a nigun? Just, it's got to be someone else because I'm kind of hoarse. Is there someone who hasn't done one, like during the, but that doesn't mean you want to do one. I don't know. There's someone who has done one.
Yeah.
Anybody got one? No.
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't going to say yes because I'm in Coffee to the People at the corner of like Haight and Ashbury, but I guess I can. So this is very pretty Navat Tehillah setting of Adonai Oz Le'mo Yiten.
Okay.
And it goes, Adonai Oz Le'mo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech et Amo. Adonai Oz Le'mo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech et Amo. Shalom. Shalom. Adonai Oz Le'mo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech et Amo. Adonai Oz Le'mo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech et Amo. Shalom. Shalom.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to everybody for being here. So if you saw things I've sent out, the plan for tonight is that there's a little bit of overflow from last week and any other overflow you have from the sharing that you did or things that other people shared that you've been thinking about since then and you want to talk about, that's welcome. I know Abraham has some things he didn't have time to share all of them, and I asked him to do that at this class. And then I personally have just a few, it's almost like random things that came up during the presentations, and I just wanted opportunity to share them. And then the next part is that we're going to do a primary source study on Torah Misinai. So you might think it's funny, I told you to listen to the whole shiur ahead of time. It's going to be a kind of like a backwards yeshiva, because usually you would hear an introduction, you go study the sources, and then you come back and hear the Rav give the talk. But in this case, you heard him give the talk. But I think that it's really special then to go through the text in depth, and reinforce it, because v'shinantam levanecha, right? Repeat it, because you're just hearing him go through it once is just the beginning. So I hope we could do that, and we'll see how far we get with that. Maybe we'll do the whole thing. And as I mentioned, I'm just kind of loosening up on the readings. I did actually put readings for each day, and you might have already gone and read them if you were very, Shagadan, whatever. But if you didn't, don't fret about it. I'm not going to refer to them today, but next time I'll probably reference them, and I'll pick a couple of things to look at just so we get a taste of that, as well as having kind of a review and a siyum, a virtual siyum. Sarah.
Yeah, just Christine Hayes, who's the author of the article, If You Had Time. Anyway, she's really an amazing scholar of the rabbinic era. And what's really fascinating is that although she's not Jewish, she is now the president of the American Jewish Studies Association. And my son took a class with her that really was remarkable at school. But everything she writes is really great and it's very comprehensible. Like she has a not too long of a book that's for like college level teaching about like Judaism, the history over time or something, and it's just very good. It's like it would be if anybody wanted to teach something. Really good.
Okay.
I forget what it's called, but I have it here somewhere. But it's
That's
really
great. Thanks for the sort of the plug about her. Yeah, I hope one of the things we're doing here is at least getting a little introduction to different scholars. I'm realizing that as I'm teaching this for like the third time, I could do even more with that. But I've tried to start putting in links to their bios. And so, like, if you didn't know who Daniel Boyarin is, right, or you didn't know who David Kramer was, or Christine Hayes, like, that's what I hope you'll come out of this class knowing. And even if you haven't read all their works, like, you have a little acquaintance, and now when you're going to hear about them again, you know, you'll go and find out more. And I think it's interesting also, there's a Talmudic scholar named Chris with a K, Chris Lindbeck. Of course, she knows Christine. She's a Lutheran, and she did go to the Jewish Theological Seminary and do her PhD in, I think, in Talmud or rabbinic literature. And she was one of the readers for my dissertation because she was living in Texas then. So it's just very interesting, you know. Anyway, yeah, and in fact, I'll mention right now then that I did put on today's Moodle, just now, some things about Ethan Tucker, Joshua Culp, and Jason Rogoff, just links to bios about them, but also just to encourage you, if you could study more from their organizations, like Ethan Tucker's, I think the president or Rosh Hashiva of Machon Hadar, and you can, if you're in New York or you want to come to New York, they have a fantastic like a seminar for rabbis, which is just pure high-level Torah study, right, and Talmud study. But if you can't come in person, they have a lot of stuff going on online too now. They have different things, and also the conservative yeshiva, which is a Joshua Kolb's, he's the Rosh Hashiva there, from what I read there in Jerusalem. They have a lot of online materials that I thought were outstanding, and then of course, if you have the opportunity, you could go there in person. I didn't put anything about Pardes, which is also in Jerusalem. I think you all know about that, but they have great podcasts, and they have a whole lot of material, and the Hartman Institute, you know, there's different places. So just try to think forward and, you know, see this as the beginning of the path. Like I say to all the B'nai Mitzvah students, this is just the beginning of your Talmud studies.
Yeah, Julia, I want to thank you for also putting the whole series of Rabbi Dr. David Kramer's lectures. So I took the opportunity to, you know, download them. So I'll have them for the future to be able to listen. But he really is such an amazing intellect and so easy to follow.
Yeah,
you know, that's what I love about him. It's so easy to get what he's teaching. Right.
Yes, he's a great teacher, and there are some people who are so brilliant, and I have trouble following them. But and Sarah's put a comment about him. Yeah, he's amazing, and yes, he's got these videos that used to be on iTunes University. They did get moved. There are on JTS and as YouTube videos, And some of them are about life cycle events. They're very much oriented towards rabbis, so they're very interesting. So, I'll say more about the one we're doing later because I want to leave some time for comments about the previous classes. So Avraham had some things to share or to share with you and elicit your comments about some of his class that we didn't get to finish up last week. So I'm going to let you do that. I'm going to mute myself.
See, am I unmuted?
Okay, I just unmuted you.
Oh, okay. Now
Sorry.
I figured out how to share this. Okay. So Zen, I did a whole lot last week, and it was a lot. And then when we passed up a slide, I thought, gosh, I wish we could have spent a little more time on this. And we were trying to get everything done in time. So this was from Sota. Bavli Sota 8a. And may not be the best examples, but this came up with the idea that not performing the mitzvah and bundles, they look to Sota for in the case of the women that they don't do it simultaneously, the lepers are not purified simultaneously, two slaves are not pierced simultaneously. I don't know what we're talking about there. They might be talking about the Shemitah year if the slave decides that they want to stay there. They get their ear pierced.
Their ear is pierced.
Yeah.
If
and
they
so I
don't
guess
want to go free.
Yeah, so I guess if several decide, oh, we don't want to go, you would not do it at the same time. And then, this is just beautiful reading that you don't break the necks of two heifers at once. So, probably could come up with more beautiful examples. But the point I was leading towards is, and I don't know if we do it like with B'nai Mitzvah happenings here and other places. And I was just wondering, what is the paradigm shifted way that we do things, even with smicha, do we care about having separate blessings for separate people, and or are we mixing people up together sometimes into one blessing? And I don't know if anybody had any comments on that, if this became a part of their ritual strategy, so to speak, as to whether to make sure things are split up or whether, you tried to do things together. So I wanted to open that up rather than just pass over this one in the middle of a whole lot of what we had to do. And I was wondering if any comments of anybody's experiences with this. Yeah, it's hard to see everybody, so I don't know. And maybe I don't even need to share it anymore because I think you got the idea from it on there. So now I can see everybody. So Emily?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's a really practical way of looking at what it is you were teaching, and an incredibly beautiful teaching. So of a way of looking at what bundles mean regarding people as well, and the individuality and honoring of each person. So thank you.
Yeah, and I was wondering if anybody ever had that experience where you felt bundled, and you weren't, dealt with individually, and I think I can relate it to my special education background at Syracuse University. Was really interesting in that we're really trained to relate to each student as an individual rather than as a classroom. And I think that tends to relate to it as well, is treating each person separately. But what about each mitzvah separately? Do we ever bundle mitzvot? We can think of, because we're in a hurry. Do we do that today, or are we careful not to do that? I don't know.
Well,
I think about how in my community, the I'm sorry.
Oh, Erwin, were you saying something? Did I lose you?
I think the cafe I'm sitting in has marginal internet, so I'll type a thought in the chat. Doesn't need to be
Okay.
spoken.
Okay. So, you know, I guess the question relates to, you know, do we hurry up things in our society today? Do we sometimes not even recognize the different miracles that we have at different times and have the different blessings as we see them? Do we do that out of convenience?
I'm thinking about, you know, they say not to blend simcha and simcha. That's en marvim simcha b'simcha. That's a different thing, because those are two different things that you shouldn't mix together, right? You try to keep each simcha separate, and like not have them together, but enjoy each one separately. Now, at my synagogue, a lot of kids have their B'nai Mitzvah together, especially if they're twins. There's a lot of twins in Westchester. I don't know. You figure it out. But sometimes parents want to have another sibling, like 3 siblings, just like they don't want to have to do the party over and invite everybody back. I don't know, for convenience. So is that a matter of like blending simcha, you know? If they're twins, it kind of makes sense, but what about if it's another sibling? And just this week we had something, because we had a bat mitzvah that ended up having her Friday night service when there was also like a school thing with a lot of little kids and Tat Shabbat and all these kids going crazy. And then the bat mitzvah family came in a totally different frame of mind, you know. And it just happened because of scheduling, rescheduling, conflicting. But it definitely was like oil and water. It didn't match very well. And for a small congregation, there wasn't like we could put one in the chapel and one in the sanctuary. We're all there together. So it's hard to give everybody, even a small place, sometimes to give everybody their due, you know. I was just sort of scrambling around to think about the egla arufa and what is the time that you break the egla's neck. I don't know if they're talking about when you find a corpse and, you know, this whole ritual was done, including breaking the heifer's neck. The other things I was thinking about were if you did not actually redeem an animal, and then it said, I guess as a incentive to redeem it, you're told, no, you'll have to break its neck if you don't redeem it. So I don't know, because I didn't read the notes on that. That kind of thing would be good, like when you're reporting on it, to go figure out what all those things mean. That would be a very Judith Abrams thing for Rabbi Judith Abrams for us to do, right? But anyway, I think that's a good question. And also about the aliyot, you know, we're very used to doing these aliyot where people feel called to come in big groups, but does it get to be sort of just en masse? I have been in congregations. In my congregation in California, there were some people who just felt like it wasn't the same if it wasn't their personal aliyah. I don't know. So, and there's pros and cons. Yeah.
That's a really good example when it comes to the aliyot, because I do wonder about that, if it should be a mix, you know, if there should be some individual, and then, you know, there should be some that are en masse on a particular issue, rather than always do it as a group or always do it as an individual. I mean, that might be a good one to mix up. Zeh, I see you want to comment.
Yeah. Well, I saw Irving's comments here, and I think that it's a kind of taking your examples, Irving. I think that there is a kind of a healthy tension among these, and probably as Irving mentioned, it's you serve better the people if you reach them where they are, instead of pulling them from to somewhere else that they don't know exactly how it's gonna be. And I think there's a difference between the organic Jewish organic communities who live in Israel and so forth, and that's much more a daily thing to go to the prayers, etc. And I personally like very much the group Aliyot as I like the individual Aliyot. I think the group Aliyot mean that many people in that community, in that kahal, we have something in common. So it's like there is and there is a calling from a subject, from a theme from the Aliyah. So it's not that, okay, let's who hasn't called yet? Okay, you in the last row from the synagogue, you come. It's not like that. So you feel called to a theme, to receive a specific blessing. The blessing is a kind of there's a specificity in the blessing because it's connected with the theme. So I think that there is a kind of a gathering of the people, like, oh, we and if you look at the people when you call people like that, people look at each other. It's like, oh, okay, we are in the same situation, we're in the same vibration, we're in the same need sometimes. So I think, but with the simchas, I really prefer the individual simchas. I don't know, it's a very personal stuff. When I see for instance bar mitzvah with more than one boy or girl, I think that you miss something, because it's a so very personal movement. You're talking about the life of that individual, girl or boy, and in a very important move for them. If you can bring this specialty to the moment, I prefer than having. I think that having more people in the same, it's different than having them together being called for something. I don't know. It's but just a thought.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raised about both poles of that, you know, and it just made me think of my legal career now has been about 41, 42 years. And when I started out, when somebody had a birthday, we announced somebody's birthday, we'd all get together in the conference room and celebrate that one person's birthday. Okay, and that was 41, 42 years ago. And then somewhere around 15 years ago, it shifted. And now we take all the birthdays for the month. And we have one day where we honor everybody's birthday that month. And we get in the room, and you know, it feels like it's nobody's birthday now, you know, and it's almost like the modern way of doing things, but it's in a way we sort of lost it. You know, I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but I was wondering, Zev, what since you and Elka are there in Brazil, I don't know if you go to the same shul there, but what happens in your shul? Do they do things together? They tend to do everything separate. You know, like, do you do group aliyot at your shul in Brazil?
When we run the service, yes. Okay. but not all the time.
Not all the time.
No, so it's not. It's not the general rule. No. But last Sunday was Rosh Chodesh, and I run the service, and so we invite people like Aleph style. So and for one aliyah, we call just one person. We honor the person who has read the Torah, so it's kind of an honor for her, and it's specific. But the first ones were like calling for a team or on the transition, on the renewing something, or we just made up a team on connected with the new month or something like that. And so the people felt called. So but not in general. And I have been to other synagogues, also liberal synagogues, Masorti mainly, but and they don't use to do collective. There is one synagogue that the rabbi is thinking about doing that, and is a rabbi affiliated to Ohala. He has been to Ohala, and he's very connected to Aleph, and we have a close connection. So I think that in the near future he's gonna use sometimes at least the collective or the theme calling, but it's not a rule.
Yeah. So thank you, Zach. I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment. I don't want to cut anybody off, but assume Rev Julie may want to go on to some other things. But
Abraham, I just want to say a kind of a twist on what you're talking about is, like the holiday of Purim, where we have Mishloach Manot, where it's a mitzvah to bring Mishloach Manot to people, to friends, or particularly for those who are needy. In that case, I've been involved in different synagogue gatherings where we put this together, and it's bundled. It's bundled, but it's, it's a wonderful mitzvah it's just the doing of it, the delivery of it as a gift. So that's just another side of the coin.
Yeah. So when you put it together, it's bundled. But when you deliver it, do you deliver it like to individual doorsteps?
Usually it is delivered separately. And sometimes the person may not be home, and you might leave it. But yeah, so there is, on the other end of it, there is that, the individuality of the gift giving too.
Yeah, because I think that makes a difference. Like, let's say you're at the synagogue and everybody just has little bags there or whatever. It's a little different when it's on your doorstep. There's a little increased feeling there about, wow, this shul did this for me. Isn't that really kind? It's right there on my doorstep. It does feel really individual.
Yeah.
When I receive it that way.
That's true. That is true.
I think the last comment I'll make is I was thinking about it when I was a chaplain in CPE, we just finished up some weeks ago, is just the consciousness how we treat people, whether we treat them in groups or treat them as individuals. A lot of times the patients would feel like the doctors or the nurses, a lot of the staff would just come through, do all the routines, get in and out. Okay, so they were like part of an assembly line. But when you're the chaplain and you go in the room and you just stay there, the person gets to tell their whole complete story, and they realize, wow, you're really there for them, even if it's an hour. They feel like they're really honored, and it really affects them a lot. So I think just because I think what this was Zen and I talked about it last week, and Zen picked up on a lot, was how this related to time. We didn't want to treat a mitzvah like we're rushing through it, and I think that's what I saw at the hospital. A lot of great people were rushing through to get to every single one on the floor, but the chaplain is the one, at least the way we were operating, who does not rush through. And I think that makes it a real difference. And I think maybe that applies to the rabbinate to some extent. I wouldn't know as much about that. Reb Julie would probably know a lot about that. Chaplaincy and being a rabbi with a congregation probably really interconnect. So
I've heard you don't Torah. They say Torah is the best Torah. If Torah is our business, it's not really a wholesale business. It's a retail business. Maybe it's a direct sales business, right?
Oh.
But it's like Avon. I don't know. In fact, sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Like, I'm always thinking, am I reaching a lot of people? Am I, always thinking of how many people were there and how much was there. But a lot of the most meaningful interactions and the most deep moving interactions have been with very small groups, or maybe a family, or one-on-one with one individual. those are the things I think people remember and things that I remember, you know? So I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've even noticed in classes, you know, now that we use Zoom when we do the breakout rooms and that started, I found the classes much more interesting that way and getting to know the other people. Or just even the fact that we have chavruta, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the those group aliyot, that's definitely a topic that comes up. I mean, in my synagogue, like on a regular Shabbat, we're having mostly individual aliyot, unless there's sometimes families, bar mitzvahs or something, bat mitzvahs, and we have like our healing aliyah. But on the high holidays, it's more group aliyot, right, by themes. And I guess there's different points of view, because when in the old style of just giving like Torah honors to the big donors at a synagogue or the important VIPs, the other people are just kind of passively watching. And by having these group aliyot, everyone gets a chance to be involved, to feel connected, you know. But if you never have individual ones, then there's a certain, like, I don't know, just question of what we're missing by doing that.
But, you know, I think part of it is because a lot of times it is the biggest donor. And sometimes it isn't like the person who had to take 2 buses, you know, and then walk a whole lot and didn't have very many resources, so can hardly give tzedakah to the synagogue, and then they don't get an aliyah. And that sort of really bothers me. But I think that person should get an individual one sometimes.
Yeah. Soul to soul business. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Reb Julie.
Door, you know, we used to say, Cage, Jewish educators give door-to-door service. Okay. Well, thank you, Avram. No, that's very good. I'm glad you brought that text back to us to reconsider it a little more. And I think, you know, looking at it as in a literary way, we might consider why they picked the examples that they picked, which tended to be kind of negative, and we're turning to more positive things. But it almost seemed to me like even things that you don't really want to do, don't try to just get through them. Maybe actually give each one the attention it needs. Why is each of those servants making that choice? Or, you know, why are we getting into this situation? I don't know. I'm sure we could even ponder it more if we want to go in the text. But as far as its implication to our rabbinates, I think it is a very relevant thing. Like, how do we give that individual attention? And if you're in a small community like I am, it's easier to give individual attention. How do you do that if you are in a big place that has more than one bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah every week and so forth? You know, how can you make it individual? So individualized. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Toda rabba. So I just had a couple of points that I thought about or I made notes about last time, and actually one of them was about this, let's see, it was the text about the 2 cups. I think that's your text, the same text, right? So it's on page 151. There was some references to things. There was a reference there to a group, B'nei Chavurah Shayu Mesubim V'Kidesh Alehem Hayom, people that get together for a meal when Shabbat comes in. And I just didn't want to just skip over that they use this term B'nei Chavurah, because these are members of like a Chavurah. And that's the origins of a Chavurah, where, you know, in early rabbinic days, when rabbis, and even I think in Pharisaic days and Tannaitic days, that people would get together, rabbis would get together to observe laws of purity in a more strict sense than that was the Pharisees. And maybe with the rabbis, I don't know, just to get together to observe various different rabbinic rituals, maybe the Seder, etc. And that was the Chavurah. And in fact, then like in the 1970s, the Chavurah were you got in the Zohar, the Chavraya, those friendship group fellowships. So it came about like in my youth, you know, that Chavurot came back. I'm sure you know what Chavurot are, and there's a Chavurah Institute, and it was, and I think some scholars like Jacob Neusner were involved in that revival in the sense of intentionally wanting to recreate this sense of intentional small fellowships. And maybe this again ties into the idea of en masse or more individualized. This is small groups within maybe apart. At first it was separate from congregations, people that were just having their own, doing their own Jewish stuff together. And then synagogues, jumped on the bandwagon and started to have synagogue chavarot within synagogues. And now more recently, there's like independent minyanim and so forth. But I just thought I'd point that out. It wasn't just, I don't think it's just like a bunch of people. I mean, I think they're referring to this kind of gathering of religious fellowship. That was one thing. Another thing I wanted to point out is, as we mentioned, some of the people in the text, I wonder if I noted which page this was on. Probably not. Well, the main thing I wanted to say, and I don't remember whose report this was in, but I hope you can start to, and maybe you already do, some of you already do, but to gradually identify the sages, maybe the more prominent ones by the times at which they lived, who they were associated with, who taught them, who's in their group of associates, who they came into ideological or personal conflicts with, because that could be relevant. Like I remember in one of the texts it said Ravina, and that should at least, like I certainly don't, I haven't memorized all the generations of all the rabbis, and I definitely go to my book about who's who in the Talmud a bunch. But like if you hear Ravina, I know Ravina and Rav Ashi are the ones at the end of the Amoraic period. So that's late. When you hear Ravina, we're talking about a late text, right? And then some of the other, let's see if I wrote down some of the figures that I think you want to start learning. Sorry, I thought I wrote them down. Yeah, like Abaye, I think, Rava. Rava was mentioned. And Rava is a fourth generation Amoran. It's always like Abaye and Rava. They are two who are often cited as, people with that are like colleagues who often had different opinions. So that's Amoraic, if you hear that, Abaye and Rava. And also, this is just a pure little pronunciation hint, which was done correctly in class. But sometimes in I know since Sonsino, they pronounce Rava as Rabbah, which isn't correct. And I remember Rabbi Judith Abrams telling me that Rabbah, when you see it written like Todah Rabbah, Resh Bet Hey, it's Rabbah. And when it has the Aleph, it's Rava in the Aramaic spelling. And then if you see some of the others, let's see. Sorry, I thought that I actually made a list of some of the ones that I think you ought to know. But, I'm sure I did, and now I'm just not finding them. Great. At any rate, do you come to recognize who are some of the Tanaim and who's the student of whom? That can be helpful to you. At least if you pick up some of the names, then you'll that will help like with the layering and understanding the stratas and that archaeology of the Talmud. So maybe I can post something about that for next week on Moodle. I just thought I wrote it down, but I'm not finding it. Maybe during the break I'll find it. Okay, so that was just a hint of something I hope you'll get, and I felt I didn't emphasize it that much, but I did at least give you some tools so you could start looking at that. Now, I know we talked about reliability of attributions, and in fact, maybe something's attributed to so-and-so, and they never even said it, and did all those stories really happen? And we've seen the controversy around that. On the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, I don't think we should take it all as just random, because some scholars have shown there is a certain reliability of the generations and of the traditions associated with certain schools, and since we're trying to see things not just in this big generalized way, but we want to see things stratified historically, then it helps us to begin to recognize the names, and the key figures and things like that. Okay, that was another thing. A third thing I wanted to share was that about the 2 cups again, was when you do the Sheva Brachot, how many cups you use. And you probably talk about that in your life cycle class, but I just thought I'd mention this, that because I don't often get to lead Sheva Brachot, and I think I've only done it a couple of times, really. But I don't mean it during the wedding, but a Sheva Brachot at a meal, right? At a Sheva Brachot during the wedding week. So this is what you do according to my beer cone, which came from people from the Chavurah Institute. It says, recite the Sheva Brachot following Birkat HaMazon in the presence of the recently married couple. Just as a minyan is required for a wedding ceremony, 10 adults should be present to offer these blessings as well. Birkat HaMazon is recited over a cup of wine. The seventh blessing is recited over a second cup, which has been held during the recitation of all the brachot. And that went with some of the lessons on the 2 cups. So you hold 1 cup on the side for the 7th bracha, which is the one of Borei Pri Hagafen, right? Okay. And then, after all 7 blessings are recited, wine from each cup is poured in a 3rd cup, and the couple drink that. So there's a 3rd cup, and I really don't know why, but you could look it up, I don't know. But it's interesting that there's a whole ritual that's surrounding that. And I read that there's a tradition that at each Sheva Brachot to have panim chadashot, like have a new person, who I guess wasn't invited before. But at any rate, that's the thing. So actually it's 3 cups, 1 for this first 6 blessings, 1 for the 7th blessing of Borei Pri Hagafen, which you've been holding that cup during the brachot, and then pour it all into a cup, and the couple drinks it. Okay. So I think those were the things I wanted to share from class about, ongoing places that you could study with some of these teachers that we read about what is a chavurah, about how to do the Sheva Brachot, and then about becoming increasingly attuned as we study to some of the key figures. And again, not naively believing all the legends about them, but knowing, that they're associated with certain other people. And I think the stories and even the legendary aspects do enrich us. They say something to us. And then, gradually at least be more and more familiar with the periods in which some of the most prominent sages lived. Okay. So let's see, what time is it? I think we can get started on the next part then, unless anyone has anything else left from last 2 weeks. All right. Well, let's see. So we're talking about Torah from Sinai, so maybe we should have a little Sinai melody. Like, how about anybody got a little Torah? I think this is at least something timely. We're getting towards Shavuot. And that's another thing I could do, God willing, in future classes, is tie in things a little more with the holidays. But not just after the holiday we'll learn about the Afikomen, but before Pesach we can learn about it. But here is something you're learning about Shavuot and giving of Torah, which maybe you could actually use in your communities on Shavuot. Use it and learn it for yourself. So anyone have a little Torah melody that you want to do? Got it? Anybody?
Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Morashat Kahilat Yaakov, Morashat Kahilat Yaakov, Morashat Kahilat Yaakov. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. But not according to Dr. David.
No. Right? Okay. Mitsuyan. That's the melody I was thinking of, except you knew the second part and I don't even know it. So that's okay. So I made a source sheet and I really redid it a little today. So if you previously printed it out, maybe just take a look at it on Safari as we go through it. I found things I had to fix on it. And so on this sheet, well, first I'll give a little introduction that I was listening to all of his podcasts, or they weren't really podcasts, they were little shiurim. And I was listening to it. I was running in the park. I was training. I actually, at age 50, did a half marathon. So I think it was around then. And that was after, I was definitely a very a kind of late bloomer when it came to that. But so I was out in the park in Bidwell Park in Chico, California, and I was listening to him, and I still remember the spot in the park where I stopped and went, wow, when he got to the part about Torah from Sinai doesn't mean Mount Sinai, it means the Sinai wilderness. I was like, oh my gosh. And I just remember exactly where I was when I heard that. So this is like a lesson that I really want to keep learning and sharing with other people. What is the meaning of Matan Torah, Torah Sinai? Where did it come from? And I'd like to go through, besides just the kind of listening to a text, having someone else feed it to us, like we can go through each of the texts and discuss them a little more in depth. And since I didn't want to put more pressure on you with your exam, your take-home exam, totally not pressure, but I'm prepared to read this, but if somebody wants to read things, you can read too, especially because I have a cold. So the first text, well, first of all, he said that there's a topic here of the giving of Torah, but his meta topic is the whole idea of doctrines and sort of catechisms and creeds in rabbinic Judaism. Are there official positions about something as big as the giving of the Torah? I mean, if something was going to be an official doctrine, it would be this, it seems. And yet, what he uncovers is that, in fact, there are different opinions about what it means, and that the different opinions that are out there are very different from what we think is the traditional opinion. So one of the things I hope is your takeaway for everybody from this course is that the things that and of course from the Aleph program in general and your rabbinic training in general, is that what you hear as this is the Jewish way to do things, right? Or this is even the halakha, don't just take it at face value. Go and look at it and see what it really said, right? And this is agadically here, but we saw in a lot of cases in your presentations that even halachically things changed, things developed. I hope we're seeing both sides, of the coin. So the first text is from Pirkei Avot and Mishnah Avot, and that's a very famous text. Maybe somebody wants to read that because that's pretty easy. Someone want to read that? And I translate. I mean, they all had translations. Except for the Tosfot, I think I didn't translate that. But if it didn't, like the Rosh, most of them had translations. Okay, so who wants to read? If you want to read it, go ahead and.
I'm happy to read it.
Okay, go for it.
Wants to. So it's Mishnah Avot Aleph.
You can sing too.
I could, but I won't.
Oh, is there a song to it, Moshe?
I could make one up.
Torah Sinai.
There we go. Zeh, I think you should do it.
Okay. I'm not good on that, but I will try. משה קיבל תורה מסיני ומסרה ליהושע ויהושע לזקנים וזקנים לזקנים לנביאים. I lost the musical thread here, but then
I'll pick it up.
You can go.
Okay.
וזקנים לנביאים ונביאים מסרוה לאנשי כנסת הגדולה הם אמרו שלושה דברים הבו מתונים בדין והעמידו תלמידים הרבה ויעשו siyag Torah.
Where does this come from? I never heard this.
The melody?
Yeah.
I was just following Zeh.
Oh, okay. I thought it was.
No, he was making it up, and I.
No, I wasn't making it up. I heard that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were, so I was just kind of.
Okay.
Doing the same thing.
So, at any rate, this is a foundational, really rabbinic, if we want to use the word myth, this is our story, right? That this Torah has been passed down in a chain of tradition from Moshe at Sinai down to us, right? The rabbis. And I do a teaching from, or well, to say from a book from Jacob Neusner, even that he just wrote a popular book. He mentioned, and you'll notice if you look at most translations, it says Moses received the Torah at Sinai. And so it was on Sepharia, but I took out the word the because it doesn't say the Torah, right? It says he received Torah. And Neusner thinks that's significant because it's Torah oral and Torah written Torah, which is prominent, pertinent to what we're learning now. And just as a little bit of humor, that my husband told me that in Moroccan Arabic, the word for a ball is kora, and they made a joke about passing the ball or something like that. So it was like they were passing the ball along. Okay, but it's passed along, and it's from Sinai, Miss Sinai, and we kind of always had this picture like it's on Mount Sinai that we receive the Torah, and how much got given at Sinai. Pinchas Peli wrote that Rabbi Pinchas Peli used to be the Torah commentator for the Jerusalem Post, said, what happened at Sinai? According to my professor at Hebrew University, nothing happened. Moses didn't get anything. According to my uncle from Mea Shearim, Moses got the Torah and the Talmud, the Vilna Shas, the whole thing right there. And most of us are somewhere in between, right? What does it mean? But somehow it was all there at that place at Sinai. And I know when Shavuot comes, I used to make my kids a Mount Sinai cake. I'd get pound cake or angel food cake or something and put whipped cream and strawberries and little cutouts of the Ten Commandments on the top. And that's where it happened. But in fact, this, as Dr. Kramer said, when you look at the Talmud, there seems to be really one place, and I welcome people to look and see if there's other places, but I'll take his word for it, where they really get into this discussion of what it meant, Torah from Sinai. And in fact, there's no agreement exactly on what it meant, but whatever the case, it clearly didn't mean the mountain itself, where he got the 10 Dibrot, right? But did he get the whole Torah there? All right, so let's go. Yes.
So then, where does the story originate from? All of us as children, and most adults we know, believe that the Torah came to Moses, at least partially, at Mount Sinai. So where is that story derived from? Do you know? Or is it just a misconception of what is meant by Sinai?
Well, that's what he seems to be saying. I mean, definitely Moses comes down from the mountain, right? He immediately starts teaching laws, or the laws are there anyway, in the book of Exodus, right? In Mishpatim, after the 10 Commandments, and definitely that's there. The Serta Dibrot are there. And I know that the rabbis, ideologically, didn't want to limit, I think, to make the 10 Commandments elevated above the other mitzvot too much, right? Because that was more maybe a polemic with Christianity. This is, again, I'm just speaking just from my general sense of it, because in Christianity, they wanted to maybe de-emphasize this following all the mitzvot in the Torah. So the rabbis are trying to emphasize following all the mitzvot and not just elevating that the 10 Commandments are holier than the other mitzvot. So it seems like some things were being taught there right away, or at least in the narrative. Yeah. And Sarah's got something to explain to us. Yeah.
Well, and so one of the things that in listening to David Kramer, and then is it's the whole idea that Neil Gilman, Olav Shalom, has said, is that, to say that God literally spoke or, gave the Torah in the way that human beings, like he has a hand and gives it over, or he's dictating to Moshe, that's actually a form of idolatry. That because if God can talk like we do, then God's not God. So to me, it's important that in this debate that the rabbi, that the sages are having, that as a person who does not take a literal interpretation of what it means to say that God spoke or God gave. To me, the meta issue for me that I think is of value is the issue of Torah as a process, that even we see in the rabbinic sages discourse that revelation of Torah is not like wham bam, thank you ma'am. It's I guess it's like maybe something along the lines of, if we use the metaphor of marriage, is, well, yes, there's a ceremony, there's the chuppah, there's the signing, but it's not like, okay, we're married, bye, or something like that. There's a constant process of, if one is really committed to a marriage, of revealing what that marriage is to each other. So I would be careful of getting personally, I would be careful of getting too hung up on, how much was said, how much wasn't said. It's that becomes a kind of literalism that I'm not comfortable with. Dibarti.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a liberal Jew who believes in scholarship, I think that Torah, came to us in different ways as our way. I mean, as a religious Jew who believes in liberal and modern scholarship, it's our attempts to understand God's will and to bring that message into our world. And even the more so, do I think it was all composed in the Sinai Desert? I don't think that either, right? If I believe the documentary hypothesis. But yeah, symbolically though, I think, we'll get to this later, like what would be the difference in focusing on Mount Sinai, this one-time revelatory event, or this ongoing process of 40 years in the wilderness? I mean, that's a very interesting conversation. And even as a shiur for Shavuot, for a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, people don't have to be as, you can give them some of the text in translation. You can bring up this and just kind of an eye-opening thing. But that doesn't mean we have to, I think, if I'm hearing you right, Sarah, like, I don't think it means we have to get rid of the beauty of that myth of that revelation at Sinai as being this powerful moment where we all stood and had a peak experience of communing with the ineffable, and there's so much there. This is symbolically, it becomes this paradigm, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to overstep my own bounds. I do want to share one of the most beautiful descriptions for me of what Rosenzweig was calling a wordless revelation, right? That there was no word, there was just encounter.
Yes.
And this was from Rabbi Gilman, because a rabbinical student said, I don't get this, like, what's wordless revelation? Yeah. And he said this, he said, imagine that you and someone that you care about deeply, that you go for a walk on the beach, and there's no speaking between the two of you, and there's this sunset that is amazing, and you both together at the same time are experiencing this sun setting, but there's no speaking with you. Then each of you go home and you write down what you saw, what you felt, what you experienced in that in that frame. So the first part is revelation. The second part is Torah. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And I just that just has always stuck with me as something so powerful. Barty.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that from Professor Rabbi Gilman, who I got to study with too, and I think he's just one of the greatest teachers of our time. So thank you so much. I never heard that particular story, and I'm going to remember that and hopefully share it. Thank you. Shamanti Avraham. Yeah.
So I think of this Torah like I think of creation, like evolution. Like you could create people, but maybe you'd create chromosomes in such a way, like even in bacteria, but the plan would be that it would evolve. So I'll give a different analogy, because like the Torah sometimes Eitz Chaim Hi, it's like a tree. But what is a tree? A tree could be a seed, right? So you plant a seed, like an apple seed, and you end up with an apple tree. So you may have been given a seed, but it doesn't mean that the seed's ultimate destiny, as it unfolded, was in an apple tree that might grow more and more branches, but the what am I saying? Like sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila, So it gets created last, but it's in thought. So the thought could have happened at Mount Sinai, and then the creation unfolds over the 40 years and even beyond. But it doesn't mean that the tree didn't grow from the seed.
Yeah.
Is what I'm trying to say.
I think, and actually Jacob Neusner used that, pretty much that same metaphor. He talked about like the oak tree that grows from the acorn. The seed of the whole Torah was there at Sinai. It doesn't mean the whole Nishas was there, right? But the seed had all the potential within it. Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. And I think there's a nice Hasidic teaching about, and I think Rabbi Lawrence Kushner brought this out, what was really heard at Sinai. Some say it was just the word Anochi, some that everyone heard. Some say it was the Aleph, and the Aleph is this. Actually, I've got it right sitting here. Hold on. This was from, I keep, some things are so nice. I kept the photocopy on my shelf for a million years. It says, this is from a book I love, Parables and Portraits by Stephen Mitchell, a Jewish, kind of a Jew-boo guy. He says, Sinai, everyone knows what happened at the bottom of Mount Sinai, but no one mentions what happened on the top. In a way, this is unavoidable. The eye can't see itself. The equation can't prove itself. Nevertheless, a few of our sages have spoken. In order to say anything, they had to be there. Rabbi Levi said, on top of Mount Sinai, Moses was given the choice of receiving the commandments or seeing God face to face. He knew he could not see God without first dying. It was like looking into a mirror with no reflection inside. Rabbi Ezra said, Moses did receive a commandment, but only one, only the first. All the others blended into silence as all colors blend into white. Rabban Gamliel said, Moses received only the first phrase of the first commandment, Anochi Hashem, I am the unnameable. Rabbi Elchanan said, Moses saw in Sinai what he'd heard from the burning bush. There was just one message, Anochi, I am. Rabbi Shmuel said, not even that. The only word was the unnameable whispered, that the unnameable whispered was I. And Rabbi Yossi said, in the holy tongue, I is Anochi. By the way, I put in the Hebrew previously. I is Anochi, Aleph, Nun, Yud. What Moses received from God was the first letter of I, the Aleph. But Aleph is a silent letter. Rabbi Yossi said, just so. So, anyway, how about with some of those thoughts, good thoughts, let's take a little break now and come back in about 10 minutes for more. All right, it's going good. All right, yeah. So about the exam, sorry. I'm just trying to see it. Okay. Why don't we, maybe I could share it on my screen. How's that? Can I do that? All right. Hold on. Share. Okay. So there's the exam, which is, it's uploaded on Moodle on today's date. And on next week's date is like a place that you can theoretically upload your completed exam. Although if you have a problem, then I guess email me, just make sure I respond and that I got it. I think the purpose of having you upload it there is so we can always keep track of it. And you'll have it there and it won't go astray, and so it'll all be in one spot. Even though it is on next week to turn it in, you don't have to turn it in till the last day of May, okay? If you need longer than that, let me know. I think it's good to just try to get them done, and there's, not to not delay it, but if there's something major problem, let me know. That's why I've tried to give it to you with extensive time so that you can work on it, but you'll let me know. So really my object in doing this is for you to do a review of the class and kind of demonstrate to me that you really took something from the class and that it's going to go forward with you, and for you to reflect on that. So I didn't give you things like identifications or things like that, especially because this is something you're doing at home. So it's not like a conventional test. It's going to have 3 short and 1 longer essay, and not very long. These aren't very long. So the first part 1 is you'll write 2 short essays, and by short I mean like 500 words. So it's just it's like a blog post, okay? But you're going to do 2 of those. So there's 9 topics I gave you there. Please pick 2 of those 9 topics, and in each of those topics explain basically 3 things: why it's an important issue, what's the significance of it, if there's different points of view that you learned about, different sides to this. It might not always be applicable, but you can explain that. And then how this, if you want briefly, just how this might impact your teaching and work as a rabbi, but mostly, what it means to us as far as Talmud scholarship. So these are all areas that we read about in class. Now somebody asked me, well, can we bring in other things that we didn't read in class, like about gender studies, for just could be an example. You can, but I do want you to demonstrate that you read the material that some material in class, or that you heard some material in class, or somewhere, on Moodle, in our textbooks, in a report, that you're showing that you did that too. Because I have had students, I did have a student one at another institution who just brilliantly wrote things, but it was clear it had nothing, there was nothing that we had done in class, and I wondered if he really, in that case, I wondered, did he really ever read the stuff we did in class, or he just knew a lot of other stuff? So I would like you to show, for example, if it's about gender studies, then some of the things that we read at the Daniel Boyarin, or the thing from the Cambridge Companion, and then you can bring in other material for sure, but it's only going to be very, very short. I'm just giving a ballpark on the length of it. You don't have to exactly adhere to that, but I'll give you an idea. Just a short thing you would write on an exam, but a little more informed because you're doing it with an open book, right? So that's the well, you can read the list. I won't tax myself reading them all, but I think everyone will find a couple of things that really interest you. Then there's just a short personal essay about your own study goals in the future. Like, from what you've learned in this class, what do you want to do next? So that's really personal. And you might look at, on February 11th, where I posted like a list of 10 different styles or orientations on the teaching or the learning of rabbinic literature. Like, what are you going to pursue? I'd like to know where you're going, B'nai Mitzvah students. What are you going to do after this class? Okay, as far as Talmud, not just everything. Will you continue Talmud or rabbinic literature? Then we get into the meteor essay, the third. So this is the 4th one, but it's longer. I'm saying about 1,000 words. And again, the length is flexible. I'm not going to count your words. But what I'm trying to say is, don't write a 20-page paper, because I don't want to, I can read all that. So just a short essay, an essay about 1,000 words or so. And there were, 3 topics, 3 of the topics that we went in depth in Agadic material. The first topic would be truth, opinion, and meaning. And that was one of the topics we had at first, with the Bavli Ravine 13b and other texts that were related to it, and even the material we're doing now in Revelation. The second would be paradigm shift, or if you want to call it axial age, Yemot HaMashiach. That was the Bavli, Sanhedrin, Reb Zalman's ideas of paradigm shift. And the third was the mystical experience. How do we teach about it? How do we study it, before they go into the Pardes and so on, Bavli Chagiga 14b and other texts that we had. So in this case, please write something that demonstrates that you studied the material in class and that you're familiar with, bringing some of the texts that we learned in class. And you can bring in other texts if you want. but definitely include ones we did in class. And then how is this going to ground your approach to this as a Jewish renewal rabbi? Not just a historical look, say a Jewish mysticism, but how will that maybe impact you on how you share your mystical experiences, or if you seek them or if you don't seek them, or if you, what their importance might be. Again, the Messianic age, it could be, you know, looking at Reb Zalman's ideas of paradigm shift, and I give you a whole page of articles about that. How does that impact the way you function and live as a renewal rabbi? And likewise with the first topic. So it's both showing your scholarship, that you learned something from the material in class and other material you want to bring in, but also that you're applying it to what it means to you as a rabbi, right? And so you still have like a couple, to do all of these, you have a couple of weeks. If you're just like, I am so overwhelmed, I cannot get them in by May 31st, and you can need like an extra week or something, let me know. But I have to turn in grades, which is just like pass fail, by the middle of June, I think. And in order to do that, you have to complete this, or you can't pass the course. But I hope to not only, I obviously everyone's on track to more than pass this class, but I'd like to give you, some personal responses to what you write, and I don't have time to do that. Okay, anybody have questions about this? Let me stop my sharing. And
just one. Was it Eruvin where it seems like I learned a lot about multivocality.
Yeah, that was there was a whole source sheet I did about that, and the Eruvin text was like a centerpiece of that.
Wow, I thought that was, that's like affected everything, that from this class. I would just mention
so
that.
You can pick that, if that's the thing that really speaks to you, right?
Well, and I used it in my chaplain thing too, because it was one lady there was Christian, and she kept on talking about the Hebrew scriptures and how it affected her family and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was able to say, well, which one of the 70 were you talking about?
Yeah. Right.
Anyway.
Well, I'm sure you said it in a sensitive way.
I didn't exactly say it like that, exactly. Yeah, but my point is that a lot of, especially non-Jewish people, or even our own community, we take a viewpoint away from it as if it only had one face.
Right. Right, and we're getting more into that today. So you can pick that, but be sure that you do ground it in at least an overview, minimally just an overview of what we learned. But if you can apply specifics of what we learned to your own rabbinate, that's great. Don't just go right into this is meaningful to me, personally, but show an overview of the text you learned and maybe how they apply. Okay. And if you have more questions, you can email me or get in touch with me. Okay, so I'd like to go forward and look at these texts of Torah Misinai. So if you're looking at the source sheet, the third text is from Gittin 60a. That's his central text. And the part that I highlighted the Hebrew and the English in yellow, I think, so that you could keep them together. So I'll read a little bit of that. So it says, Rabba the Rav Yosef, the Amri Tarvahu, Rabba and Rav Yosef, the two of them said, Ein korim b'chumashim b'bet HaKnesset. You mustn't read out of a chumash in the Bet Knesset. He's like, come, that's all we do, right? The big blue book or the big red book. Mishum kvod hatzibur, because that is not honoring the honor, the kvod hatzibur, the honor of the community. We've heard that term elsewhere, right? Kvod hatzibur has often been dredged up as the reason women shouldn't make an aliyah in the synagogue. V'Rabba v'Rav Yosef de'amri tarvayu hai sefer aftarta asur lamikra bei b'Shabbat. And they also said, the two of them, Rabba and Rav Yosef said, the two of them, Tarvayu, said, you can't read a sefer of haftarot in the Bet Knesset on Shabbat, or to read it in it on Shabbat. And he explained that this means incomplete books of the Haftarah. Well, that's exactly what's in most of our Chumashim, right? They all have little selections of the prophets, and they're incomplete. And of course, it was referring to scrolls back in the day. Now it's in a what do you call it? A codex in a bound book, right? My Tama Delani Tam Likatev. So what does it mean you can't write it down? Mar bar Rav Ashi Amar L'taltule Nami Asur. And excuse me, Rav Mar bar Rav Ashi. So Mar, the son of Rav Ashi, says you're not even allowed to handle it. That's also forbidden, right? You could follow that in the English too. My Tama. So why? Right? Deha lahaze lemikrebe velahi sharei letaltule b'sharei lemikrebe. So if you can't even handle it, you can't read it, right? Velahaya sharei letaltule b'sharei lemikrebe. No, he says, sorry. He says not so. I'm sorry, I'm misreading it. I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of tired with my cold. Everything's like Valahi, it's not so. It is permitted to handle it, right? Lahi, that's not the case. Sharela tatuli v'sharela mikrebe. It is permitted to handle it and is permitted to read it. Okay. The Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Mayne B'Safar Dagadata B'Shabta. So these two rabbis, right, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, would actually look things up in a book of Agadah on Shabbat, right? V'haloni tanikatev ela kevan de la efshar et lasot l'shem eferutotecha. So these two rabbis would actually be looking at a book of Agadah, but hold on a minute, right? We're not even allowed to write down the Agadah. It's oral Torah. How could they do that? Well, there's this catchphrase from the book of Tehillim, right, where it's 119, where it says, it's time to act for Hashem. They've turned over your Torah. They've uprooted your Torah, right? Or it says nullified your Torah. So literally, it means like it's time to act for Hashem because people have turned over the Torah. But the rabbis took it almost like they misread it on purpose as a commandment. Turn over the Torah. It's time to act for God and turn things upside down and even to nullify things in the Torah because it's a state of emergency. And the classical example was like Elijah on Mount Carmel. How could he offer the sacrifice there on Mount Carmel? It was time to act for Hashem. And I'm sure that this is applied to the Pro Bowl, and I've been looking up everywhere to try to find out who said that's why Hillel was able to do the Pro Bowl, because it was Et Lasot L'Shem Eferutotecha, right? I couldn't find it. I've really been looking and looking everywhere. I don't know, Sarah, if you can find it, but
what makes you feel that would be?
I'm sure I remember when I was studying it that I saw that, and I remember quoting that as
because it feels like all the materials that they at least gave us in the chapter of the book was everybody justifying Hillel's doing it without anyone saying
I know
that he overturned.
That chapter didn't say it at all, and I almost want to write to the. If I get really desperate, I write to the authors and say, but
Dear Mr. Smarty Pants.
Yeah, like I remember that used as a justification, but in the chapter and reconstructing the Talmud, they didn't mention that at all. So maybe I just learned it as like a tradition. Hopefully I'll find it. I'll look it up. Okay. So, so, we've seen that you can't have incomplete books, and you can't have various kinds of books, but in fact, you really can. You can have them just as you can have, and the main justification is you can have these books of Agadah because it's a necessity, right? And all of these things are there so that we'll maintain the Torah and that we'll keep learning the Torah, right? Okay. So by mine Abaye, okay, so Abaye, people were asking of Abaye, I think, yeah? Yeah, Abaye raised the question with Rabbah. Okay. So by mine Abaye mi Rabbah, yeah. Abaye asks Rabbah, remember I said they often go together, Mahu lichtov Megillah latinok. Can't we read this, can we write a partial scroll for a child? So as he pointed out, as Dr. Kramer pointed out, tinok for the rabbis meant a child. So litlamed ba, so they could like learn the Torah portion or just learn Torah out of it, right? Tiva'e, so well, let's look at it from 2 points of view. Tiva'e laman amar Torah Megillah nitna. Let's look at it from 2 points of view. The point, and this sounds very Stama'itic, right? Now let's see it from, I'm guessing. Let's look at this from 2 points of view. The person who says Megillah nitna, the person who says the Torah was given scroll by scroll. Tiva'e laman amar Torah chatuma nitna, and ask of this of the person who says the Torah was all given in a sealed form. Okay, so that's where the discussion really begins. What are these 2 theories of how the Torah was given? As it's given as scroll by scroll, or it's given like chatuma, like sealed and complete, right? Their translation was, let the dilemma be raised according to the one who says the Torah was given from the outset scroll by scroll, and let the dilemma also be raised according to the one who says the Torah was given as a complete book. I put the notes, like the English filler notes, explanatory notes, in italics, because they don't really match up to what we learned from Dr. Kramer, or even from what Rashi says, right? There's a whole theory there of what it meant. Not quite like what he says. So if you go forward, just kind of hold the space. I think we're going to come back here. Maybe not. We're going to go up to Rashi. Look at the next text, which is Rashi on Gittin 60a, his text 4 and 5. And that is his comments on Megillah and Chatuma Nitna. I don't know, anybody feel up to reading those? They don't have vowels, but they are in Hebrew. Anyone want to read it? Okay, if you want to read it. Since I got my way through the Aramaic there. Okay. So Rashi says about Megillah Nitna, כשנאמרה פרשה למשה היה כותבה ולבסוף 40 שנה, מם שנה, כשנגמרו כל הפרשיות, חיברן בגיטין ותפרן. And I just translated it because there was no translation. So I translated it myself, and I listened to Dr. Kramer's translation. I was pretty close, right? Scroll by scroll it was given. When a parsha or a section would be said to Moses, like by God, it would be revealed by God, he says, he would write it down. And after 40 years, when it was all done, it took 40 years for it to get done. Then he sewed it up with the Gidin and he put it together. Okay. So that's already a bit of a revelation, right? That it's being given out in parts, and that it's taken 40 years for it to be completed. It certainly doesn't say that it was all given in a piece at Sinai, right? Okay. And then for Chatuma Nitna, so Rashi says, Lo nichtavad sof arba'im, like until it wasn't written down until 40 years. Lachar shnemu kol parshiot kulan והנאמרות לו בשנה הראשונה ושנייה היו סדורות לו על פה עד שכתבן. לפי שאין כותבים, and then I cut it off there, I think. So he says, what does that mean? If you believe it was chatuma, it was given chatuma, what it means is it wasn't all written, it wasn't written down at all until like 40 years later, after, when all of these different sections had been given to Moses, and anything that was given to him earlier, like in the first or second year and so on, he would memorize it and organize it by heart, right? Ba'al peh, like he learned it by heart. And then he wrote it down. Okay. So why did Rashi say this because of the citation that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said in Gittin 60a. He said that his proof text for the Torah being a complete book was, take this scroll of the Torah, and that's in Deuteronomy 31:26. And I hope I highlighted it, right? So he says, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, Torah hatuma nitna shne'amar lakuch et sefer Torah hazot. Take this Torah scroll, and that's at the end of Moses' life, that he actually takes the whole scroll, like that it's really finished. All right. And then Dr. Kramer brought in the Tosfot, who basically disagreed, or they complicated what Rashi said. They didn't quite buy the whole thing. So I could not find that in Sefaria. When I clicked on, the commentaries, it gave me Rashi and no Tosfot. So I went to, thanks you to, I think Zed told me about Hebrew Books. I went to Hebrew Books and I found it, and I took a screenshot and put it there for you. Okay, and so this is what it says. Torah hatuma nitna. Tema dichtiv, as it's Vayikach Sefer HaBrit, Vayikra Va'oznei Ha'am, Upiresh Rashi Befi, I'm not sure, Befi Chumash, Dahainu Mibreshit Ad Kan. Basically saying that in another place, in Exodus 24, Rashi had a different interpretation, and Rashi said that when Moses took the book of the covenant and he read it in the ears of the people, Rashi said this was like a partial, incomplete Chumash that was from the beginning of Bereshit until that moment, right? ונראה לפרש דלא כאמר חתומה ניתנה שלא נכתבה עד לבסוף אלא שעל סדר נכתבה, יש פרשיות שנאמרו תהילה לפני אותם הכתובים לפניהם, ולא נכתבה עד שנאמר לו אותה שכתובה לפניה. וכותב זאת אחריה, okay, etc. So he said, the Tosfot are imagining, Dr. Kramer said, the Tosfot are kind of imagining that God gradually reveals the Torah over 40 years, and he separately revealed an order for it. So, and then Moses had to put it all in order. I guess maybe he explains that better than I do, if you remembered it. But he had to save a lot of it in his memory, and then the order is revealed, and then he puts it in order. So some parts of it were spoken and revealed in a different order that they were written down, and this, in a way, anticipates our modern scholarship, that we know that if we believe modern scholarship, and you can find more about the conflict of modern scholarship and traditional belief in Torah.org, which is by a lot of Orthodox Jewish Torah scholars, that, there were different documents in a different order, and then they were put together in the order we have now. In a way, they're kind of getting an inkling of that is to come, right? But the bottom line of all of this is that it's not, and now I'm stopping in the park and going, wow, it's not about what happened at Mount Sinai, it's about the whole Sinai wilderness experience, right? So that's what I want to ask you. First of all, was that all clear after you heard? If not my poor paltry explanation, you can go back and hear Dr. Kramer say it so much more eloquently. But I think it's good to review it and go back and look at this text again. But what's this difference in symbolism to you, in an agadic sense, in a literary sense, to think of getting Torah as a revelation at Sinai, or Torah as the product of a wandering in the desert and learning things on the way, and learning some things by heart and some things in a written form? And any thoughts about that? Yeah, Elka.
Right. I read before I heard him speak.
Yeah. Okay.
And when I finished, I couldn't really understand what's the point and why is it important. But when I heard him at the end, when he explains the difference if you think of the Torah being given over as a process
Yeah.
over the 40 years, then it's God giving bits and pieces as the people needed or as the people evolved, as the consciousness of one people got enhanced, then more would come. And I thought that that was so amazing, so truthful, so easy to explain, that I was very happy to learn this and to hear and to learn this. I agree.
Yeah.
But
Shamati.
Yeah, the other thing that seems to be part of this thinking is that there doesn't seem to be a single rabbinic view on this.
Yes.
Now, it's been left rather open-ended for us to process the way it was processed.
Right.
And I think that's pretty amazing that it's, you know, it's there isn't a dogma that we are required to say we agree and therefore we are Jewish. You know, unlike other faiths where, you know, there's a certain dogma that you have to agree to.
Right.
Because look, the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai is like the most profound story, the most profound myth of the Jewish people. And for the rabbis to say, well, you know, it's kind of open-ended here.
Yeah.
It's I think that's really, it's actually quite powerful for us, because it actually makes a lot more sense to me that it had been done in process rather than this amazing revelation of multiple laws and rules and everything else all at once, which seems rather inconceivable.
Right. Well, I think you're bringing up a very good point. And of course, this is one that Dr. Kramer brought up, that there are very different doctrines and different views on everything in Torah, even on the very giving of the Torah itself, right? And if there was going to be, my goodness, something that we'd all agree on, this might be it, but we don't, right? And we're not like excommunicating people because they don't agree on this. That's not why, right? But in fact, when you hear there's the traditional view, it's really often a multiplicity of views. And he says there's no one traditional view. Rabbis plant seeds, offer and seeds, that image was brought up before with Abraham. They plant the seeds, they offer alternatives, and sometimes they even give outrageous claims, he said, right? But I mean, one thing it brings up for me is how we get revelation in our life. Like sometimes we have a peak experience where we think we know it all. And, right, I think I shared a couple of mine with you on Moodle. But there's those moments of clarity and of being your peak experience and your moment in your higher consciousness. And then there's the wandering in the desert. And metaphorically, I put some of these things on my website because I have a whole page about mountains and peak experiences and a page about wilderness, right? And those are life experiences, don't we? In our wanderings in life and in our, you know, journeys and getting lost and all that when we come down from the mountain, isn't that where we get a lot of the revelation? I mean, to me, to say that Moses got different things at different points and stored them up and then put them together in a coherent whole, that to me speaks so much about life, you know? Sarah, what do you want to say about that? Or other?
Well, I think that this also dovetails with that famous line in Devarim that says that this Torah is not only for you folks here, it's for the generations and the generations to come. So it's this kind of I think it's very it's that in each generation Torah is revealed collectively in different ways, and then maybe in different times of our lives also. Mm-hmm. What Torah means to us unfolds, or transforms, or whatever, complexifies, so that that's why I think it's sort of sad, actually, that in the modern era, the folks who felt so threatened by, the documentary hypothesis or other things, they closed ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have the chutzpah to say what's in the Talmud, you get kicked out of that environment, because they actually have become much more driven by a kind of ideological reactionary response, which is a fear-based, a threat to, I think it's a response to feeling threatened by all of the things that Jews have gone through. But it's sad, because it means that it shuts down any possibility for dialogue.
Yeah, I think definitely symbolically, these 2 points of view of Torah being something that's given all in a revelation, and Torah being something that's a process that's going on in an ongoing way, doesn't just apply to Sinai, but it applies to those who view Judaism more developmentally, like from the conservative movement onward, and those who are more saying there's this train of tradition, like in Avot, it was handed down, just carefully handed down, don't drop it. Hand it down as it is. There's a certain sense of intactness there, right? It's not growing like that tree that's growing. It's that little package that you're handing down from generation to generation. And even the book, Putting God on the Guest List for the kids for B'nai Mitzvah. Are you familiar with that? That's a lovely book. And there's like a workbook for kids too, like putting God on your guest list. And it had some nice stories, but one of them was like about this idea of the chain of tradition, which I feel that parents feel like, if I could just give my kid that Torah on the bima, right, I passed it along for another generation. But we don't want them to do just that, right? We want them to be able to make the Torah their own and create with it and create a new Torah, right? The same Torah, but expanded with Avram. And then Zed.
So I actually learned this in a drash from an Orthodox rabbi, and I thought it made a lot of sense. We're talking about an era of freedom, in a sense, of leaving Mitzrayim.
Yeah.
But if you went on a plane and you were told that the plane didn't have a guidance system, you wouldn't have freedom for very long. You'd be dead. The plane would go down. And that's what the Yara, that's what the Torah is, in a sense, is a guidance system. And maybe it takes a mythology, and maybe we see this in people throughout the world, that we need a mythology to go along with a guidance system to sort of create a cohesiveness, to have sort of like a social contract in order that, we don't kill each other, that we actually can live together, with some principles. And I'm wondering, if you take the myth completely away, if the principles really can carry from generation to generation.
Well,
and so I wonder.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'll leave it at that as a question,
I think that, but that there could be different myths, right? I mean, because also the wandering in the desert is part of our myth too. Maybe.
Oh, I agree, but I mean,
the myth, right?
But I mean, we're substituting myths, but the idea is we still want a myth. Whether it's like even the idea that it's transmitted from Joshua to the elders, or whether it was on Mount Sinai or 40 years, or even the redaction theory at this point is still mythic in a way, because we really can't prove it. We don't know the redactors. and you know, but I just think that we long for some sort of myth to go with something that will create cohesiveness for a people. That's what I'm trying to say, and I think we can see it here with the indigenous people. You know, they have their myths of creation and whatnot, and I think it pulls the tribe together. You know, so
yeah.
I don't know.
Abraham, I think that this is like I just sent the link from, this is an article from a long time ago, but it's by Rabbi Gilman, who addressed a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that he talks about in his books, like The Way into Encountering God in Judaism or Sacred Fragments, is that he draws on some other philosophers that we can have, and anthropologists, there can be living myths, which are ones that, you know, like when we were 9 years old, yes, Grandpa in the sky gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, you know. Then there can be broken myths, which as a result of our education, we recognize that certain things we are not going to literally take. We're not going to take them literally. And a great example that he gave in a talk that he did, that I'll send the link to everybody, is he really believes in resurrection, Tchiyat HaMetim, and what he says, you know, people don't like that I say that I believe that myth. You know, he says, do I think that, you know, at the end of time, like, you know, human beings are going to rise up from the earth and the price state is going to go through the roof? No, I don't think that. That's not what I think. But what I feel what I believe deeply is that God is stronger than death. And so for me, believing in resurrection of the body and the soul is really important, because I don't believe that death should have the final say. And Judaism is a religion of life. So that's a myth that's living but broken. So it's imperfect. And then the dead myths are something like the Holocaust happened because so many Jews were sinning and not following the mitzvot. Like, you know, mipnei chateinu, because of our sins, we are being punished. Most Jews would reject that now, including many Orthodox Jews, by the way. So I think I absolutely agree with you. And the question is, for a lot of us, how does a myth stay vital and living? And it's not fairy tales, because they help structure our lives. You know, we live through stories. Stories are our identity. That's why when people lose their memories, they lose who they are. Barty.
Right. And what was his book on the fragments? He wrote, there's a book that he wrote with the title something with the fragments.
Sacred Fragments.
Sacred Fragments. It's a great read. It's
so
very.
And you're right. The idea of the things that are broken that we can't really accept anymore, as far as theology in that case, and then how we treasure certain things, or how we remake myths. That's definitely.
Well, I mean, he used as the example that Moshe threw the first set down, and then he had a second set, but we took the first broken set with us.
Right. So there's a place even for those broken myths, for some of them, right? Not the dead ones, but the broken ones that are still treasured. They're still treasured. Zeh, you've been waiting patiently to speak there. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Well, a lot here, and I think that I was thinking about exactly these sacred fragments, and if I recall correctly, Sarah, you may help me. Gilman mentions that there is the revelation and the interpretation. That all that we do is interpretation. That's the funny part. No, he doesn't use the word funny, but it's like something like that. That's what makes us go ahead. And I like that. But when I heard this David Kramer, and I hear you talking about him and about the revelation on the desert, it came to me the idea that not just that we had revelation and then interpretation. We we have a kind of a ongoing revelation.
Yeah.
And that's so we go, and I think that if we consider the myths, I think that there is a kind of archetypes in this mythology, and then it's not that we break them, but we go beyond them. We go through them to another kind of perception, another kind of revelation, as to say. And for instance, when you mentioned the tablets, the 2 sets, and I've heard a beautiful explanation about that. And if you read carefully, the first set, God takes the stones and he writes the stones and gives to Moshe. And the second one, he said, oh, let's do something different. Bring me the tablets. So it's like going for it's. I see this like when we raise a child. Say there's a time that you do things for the children. Then there is a time that say, okay, you can do yourself, and you can, and that's a different kind of relation and revelation. So I really like these 2 sets. I don't miss. Oh, we should have the first one. No, I like the idea that the second ones are really more in our hands, or to say, and also that we just a final comment. And as we read Torah year after year after year, and sometimes I read it and I said, no, this wasn't written this way. It says somebody changed that. There's something different here. So I think that we can go layer by layer by layer. Each year we have a new insight, a new revelation, a new take from the Torah and so forth.
Thank you. Well, that's beautiful, and I'm glad you reminded me about this, the breaking of the tablets. God willing, I'll share something on Moodle about how Rabbi Judith shared about some Agadot about Moses struggling with those Torah that were living stones like coral. They were kind of alive. They seemed to be a stone, but they're alive, and how Moses struggles, and he wins the struggle by pulling them to earth, and better something broken and incomplete, but here on earth, than the perfect thing as a perfect thing in heaven that isn't really with us on earth. So I'll try to share that. So let me just say, I won't try to read the last text, but it's already in your source sheet, and of course you can listen to, or you did listen to Dr. Kramer talk about it. But that last part from Gittin 60b was about, was the Torah originally more oral or was it more written? And even though we would assume that it was more oral and the written was small, then in fact there's a lot of disagreement about that too, both in the Gemara and in Rashi too, that it's not so cut and dried. And in fact, it's not totally clear. There are different opinions about whether Torah was originally oral or was originally written. And the bottom line, he said, is that all Torah is Torah, right? Written or oral. That's very important as rabbinic doctrine. So I wanted to just conclude with saying the Sfirat HaOmer, if that's okay with you. At least for here, it is time to do it here in New York. So I like to stand up when I say Sfirat HaOmer, so we'll just do that without tripping over the cord, I hope. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer. Hayom 24 yom shehem 3 שבועות ו3 ימים לעומר תפארת שבנצח. And our friends, and David Seidenberg has on the Neo Chassid counting app, he has a quote for the day, so it's a short quote. I think you'll like it. Every letter is a complete world, so that when a person says any word which is called a teva, with great spiritual connection, he certainly awakens the upper worlds. This is the meaning of God's command to Noah, come into the ark, into the teva, means come into the words. That's from the Baal Shem Tov. All right, so looking forward, again, don't worry too much about preparing for class, focus more on doing the exam, but if you have time, you can look at those readings. And if you looking forward to seeing you at our Siyum, our virtual Siyum. I hope everyone will bring a snack so we can have like a virtual Siyum. Okay. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
Feel better.
Oh, thank you. I'm okay. Thank you. Okay. All right.